Now, again, because if you're going to give me a microphone, I'm going to talk about me just a little bit. And I learned about figure and provenance back, I think in 2019. I was speaking at a conference in Newport and heard about it and was pretty excited about it. Ended up doing a YouTube video on it way back, I think in 2020. And now I get to interview Anthony or talk to Anthony Moro here, so that's pretty exciting. So Anthony, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about yourself first, who you are, and then I will jump in with some questions.
Very exciting. So, hi, Anthony Moro, CEO of ProvLabs. Like most in the room, I had a long career in TradFi. I did 20 years at BNY Mellon, running big parts of their depository receipt group. After that, I found my way into a public REIT, and then I met Mike Cagney, who we'll talk about in a minute, whose vision for this industry sort of blew my mind. And everything I learned at Bank of New York about how assets are serviced and securities move around the world really coalesced into the vision that Mike had. And here we are today. So really excited for the conversation. Happy to talk through the rest of the journey and what we're doing. The space is, again, we've heard this over and over again, still early days, but maybe not that early. Everyone's been at this for several years now. It's time to put some real assets on chain, get some real value going on, and I think that's what we're doing.
All right, thanks, Anthony. Again, I mentioned Figure, Provenance. Now there's ProvLabs, which spun out of Figure a few months ago. So just to get started, can you tell us the difference? This happens a lot with decentralized protocols and foundations and such, where the same group kind of has two or three separate entities. So can you just first explain the difference between Figure, Provenance, and ProvLabs?
So it all goes back to Mike Cagney, who was a co-founder of SoFi, the neobank. Left there and decided that the future was on blockchain, as I mentioned. Went around to his banking partners and said, hey, let's spin up some businesses on Provenance blockchain, which he had invented at the time. It was a blockchain based on Hyperledger Fabric, which was the technology of 5 years ago. It has since moved into the Cosmos ecosystem. And they all said, great, Mike, we love you. We'll invest in your company, but we're not going to be first movers in the space. And I think most of them would still say that today, 5 years later. So Mike went out and he built what has become the largest non-bank lender of home equity line of credit, which are second lien mortgages in the United States. He's also convinced about 150 other non-bank home lenders to come into his ecosystem. So right now, 15 to 20% of all home equity line of credit are issued on the Provenance blockchain by Figure and their partners, making the HELOC industry the first and, to my knowledge, only business that has been materially disrupted by blockchain technology anywhere ever. If you look at any other industry in our world, it's a very small fraction of 1%. As I mentioned, home equity line of credit are about 20% probably this year, which is very material, obviously. The reason they do it is cheaper, faster, and safer. Digitally native created loans that are cheaper, faster, and safer than their traditional TradFi paper-based counterparts. Not sexy. Most of the savings is in audit and time. Right? It's not DeFi, it's not going to turn any heads over at the conference center. But for TradFi firms to be able to save 100 basis points of the notional value of home equity line of credit, which are in the tens or even hundreds of billions of dollars of value every year, it gets people's attention in the TradFi world. And that's what we're doing over and over and over again. So that's Figure. Figure, as I said, spun out the Provenance blockchain, which is a nonprofit foundation like most other layer ones. You probably don't know much about it because it's not listed on centralized exchanges. The reason it's not listed on centralized exchanges, if you go back to the Stone Ages just before the Trump election, there was a big question whether layer one blockchains were public securities or not. Figure had a couple of S1s with the SEC. First is for the IPO of their company on the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ, and the second is for this yielding stablecoin, which we'll talk about, which is completely based on Provenance blockchain technology and hash, which is the token. So in terms of staging, we needed to get the S1s through the SEC, which has now happened as of last Thursday, and we'll talk a lot more about that next. So the foundation needed to be nonprofit and offshore, and then ProvLabs carved out of that as a for-profit firm, really to help firms attach into the Provenance blockchain network. So Figure Lending will come back together in the post-Trump election world, and they'll IPO that one company, so there'll be one fewer entity of the four, which is great. But Provenance Labs and Provenance Foundation will still be separate because the foundation needs to focus on what the foundations need to focus on, and Labs will focus on integrating enterprise companies into the Provenance blockchain.
All right, well, that was a lot to digest the differences in all these companies, and I think it's something kind of unique to the blockchain world, which is you need more than one company or more than one entity to try to get your solution through. You mentioned, correct me if I'm wrong, you said 20% of HELOCs now are going through Figure in the Provenance blockchain. Is that right?
And their partners. So Figure is a B to B to C business. So you can go to figure.com, you can take out a home equity line of credit, you can get a decision in 5 minutes, and you can get funded in 5 days, all things that are enabled by blockchain. But if you also go to Guaranteed Rate or Movement Mortgage or the Money Store, that process is using the Figure tech stack. Loans are being integrated and built on Providence. So it's B2C in that you can do it at figure.com, but it's B2B in that all these other firms are using the Figure stack. And if you think about how a business or an industry or an asset class is disrupted, that's exactly the way to do it. So we have the Figure playbook, and ProvLabs is doing that now for other asset classes. And Infinio is a sponsor of this investment. They're a life insurance company. They're exactly following the Figure footsteps. They're using the Figure technology, which ProvLabs has taken over, and they're putting individual life insurance policies on chain with the ability at the you have the origination, you have the warehouse, you have the securitization. The process is exactly the same. Technology stack is exactly the same. The asset class is different, but it's also going to be a B to C to B business as well. They've already put $500 million of life insurance policies on chain in a very short amount of time, making them, I believe, the fastest growing RWA asset issuer ever, from 0 to 500 million in 3, 4, 5 months. They're going to be at $2 billion by the end of the next quarter. It's growing like wildfire.
Right, and what you mentioned is this is the way you disrupt, and the disruption isn't like we've thought about and seen, and like a lot of us have really wanted in the crypto industry, which is we want to make a huge splash and everyone to talk about it. It's been more from Mike Cagney and that group seeing there's a need in the HELOC world to do something that is more efficient, that is more transparent, that is easier. It's just a bunch of paperwork. We can put all that on chain. That's the beauty of the blockchain. It's this decentralized ledger. Now we can do it, and again, partnering with other companies to not say, hey, we're Provenance, we're Figure, we're awesome, come look at us. It's more of, let's just get the business on chain, and then we'll figure out how to do it. And it's a little bit akin, in my mind, to what's happening if we talk about the idea of like tokenized funds and what BlackRock is doing and such. Basically, they're almost forcing it down everyone's throat, because if they can save a few basis points, if they can save 2, 3, 4, 5% on their trillions of dollars under management, that's huge, and the rest of us are just going to have to, for lack of a better term, kind of suck it up and deal with it, and go, okay, now we got to figure out this on-chain thing and this wallet thing and tokenization and everything else. So this is the way you do it. And as you mentioned, this was also supposed to be Cole from Infinio was supposed to be here talking about life insurance, which I mentioned. Started my career in the insurance business, so that was pretty exciting, and I enjoyed learning about and helping out Infinio quite a bit in this endeavor. So now I want you to talk a little bit about, you mentioned those S1s. Talk about the yield-bearing stablecoin that's out there, Yields, because it's, in my mind, I think the first that is actually an approved yield-bearing stablecoin.
Yeah, so there's a ton of noise around stablecoins in our industry. They're an absolute elemental building block for getting anything done in the real-world asset space. USDT and USDC have been the only two that have scaled. USDT does better because there's a lot more permissionless nature of them. Fine, good businesses. I mean, absolutely necessary for getting anything done today, but they keep all the yield, and that doesn't seem fair, does it? Lots of endeavors to try to pass through that yield to the end coin holder. The US SEC sees the distribution of yield turning a coin or a token into a security, obviously, which is why you have Dave spoke about this early this morning around the stablecoin legislation, the Genius Act, et cetera. But all that is moot as of last Thursday. Last Thursday, for the first time ever, the US SEC has allowed a yielding registered stablecoin alternative in the form of Figure Certificate Corporation's YLDS is the ticker for it. It's the first ever yielding stablecoin to be approved by the SEC. You can go to figure.com right now in an MPC wallet construct, which is very, very important. Not a lot of people are talking about an MPC wallet construct. You actually control your keys, you control your wallet. It's not a centralized construct where somebody else can own your assets, and this is important for collateral being able to borrow and lend against your own assets, and having digitally native line of sight, which is very important. And we talked about funds a couple times. Funds are not digitally native the way that they're constructed now. You don't have ownership of them. They can be rehypothecated and be lent against. Digitally native form of stablecoin, which is what YLDS is absolutely crucial to what we're doing. So it yields almost 4%. You can buy it on figure markets right now. As the applications, I think, explode, you're going to be able to use it for cross-border remit. You're going to be able to use it for payments. You're going to be able to use it for collateral. The end goal, on the retail side anyway, is a PayPal-like interface where I can hold a 4% yielding Web 2 interface PayPal, and I can buy my cup of coffee, the proverbial cup of coffee at Starbucks, which seems to be the holy grail of this industry, because Starbucks obviously will have an account. I'll have an account. PayPal has millions and millions of registered users on their platform. And now, for the first time ever, if you think about it, take the next step out. Do I need a bank account? So my bank account pays me almost no interest. So I take money from my savings account and I put it into my checking account, which pays me a little bit more than almost no interest. And if I have any real amounts of cash that I want to hold in the TradFi world, I put it into a treasury account, which might pay me something in the threes. But now all that needs to go away, because now if I'm in New York or if I'm a farmer in Uganda, I can have a US dollar bank account in a Web 2 environment, fully backed one-to-one, 10Ks, 10Qs under the 1940 Act of the SEC, tradable peer-to-peer, which is the absolute killer use case. So let me take a big step back. I know I'm throwing a lot of information at everybody. There's one type of security in the entire arsenal of the SEC where parties, known parties of course, because it's a security, can face off against one another without the intermediation of a broker-dealer. And under the 40 Act, it's called a face amount certificate. And they were first put into the SEC's mandate dozens, maybe scores of years ago, I'm not exactly sure when, maybe 1940, but they were used for things like bonds, where you could actually have a physical certificate and you could give it to your friend and he could buy it from you. So they dusted off that structure, which is very creative, and now for the first time ever, using it in a peer-to-peer construct. It doesn't have to trade on an ATS. You don't have to do create redeem like you do for the tokenized treasuries. I think it replaces tokenized treasuries. I think it replaces the existing non-yielding stablecoins, and it will get into DeFi very shortly using either a structure like a GDR structure or a structure like the Mountain Protocol, where it's issued into the Bermuda Monetary Authority and then you put a wrapped structure on it and you can get it into DeFi protocols. So still early days. The security isn't even a week old. They've had hundreds and hundreds of individual accounts issuing it. You can go check it on the ProvLabs blockchain. But I think it's revolutionary. I think it changes our industry, and couldn't be more excited about it.
Yeah, I appreciate the fact that still buying the proverbial cup of coffee is the kind of gold standard for, like, can I spend this money? What can I do with it? And the fact that I've been excited about stable coins because of those reasons, because I might not need a bank account, because I can hold it in my wallet, which most of us, and for my age, most of the people a generation younger are used to doing everything on their phone anyway. They have a bank account because they have a bank account because that's what they've always been told to do. But the idea is I have money, I can effect a transaction by pushing a button or by touching my phone. And now it's going to be, I can effect a transaction by pushing or by touching my phone, but that money has never touched the bank. And to go a step further, which is what you all are doing, while that is sitting in my phone, which we all know it's not sitting in the phone, but while it's sitting there, now it's going to be earning yield and it's going to be doing so natively. Can you explain the difference between natively issued or native digital versus what we kind of talked about with tokenization of funds?
So, in pure blockchain land, the only things that we want to do at ProvLabs and in Providence are digitally native assets. And if you take a commercial real estate building and say, I'm going to tokenize this piece of real estate, well, what does that mean? The equity, the debt, the actual physical building, you can't tokenize something that's physical. The proverbial Picasso painting. You can't tokenize something that exists in the real world and have line of sight to the truth that the asset is yours. You have to trust that the Picasso is a Picasso, that whoever owns the Picasso is taking care of it, that they're not lending it to someone else, they're not selling it to someone else. Like, you have a representation of a sale of that asset, but you don't have true asset ownership, true asset perfection. You can't use your asset ownership as collateral to lend against and do something else, go buy Bitcoin. With digitally native loans, and what Cagney's genius is, the HELOCs only exist on blockchain. They don't exist elsewhere. If you buy any of the tokenized treasuries, generally you're buying a digital twin of an asset that exists in the real world. The real cap table sits in the real world. The cap table that controls your ownership is a digital twin or a copy. You can't use it in most cases as collateral because you don't own the underlying collateral. Someone else does. It's a centralized construct. Someone can steal it. Someone can run away with it. We've had a lot of bad actors in this industry. The centralized construct where I don't own my coins, I don't own my assets, isn't long for this world because, again, how many times do we have to see a $1 billion hack or a $1 billion bad actor to say we don't need to trust, right? We need truth, not trust. And if it's a digitally native asset and you can perfect your ownership through one of the UCC filings, UCC 8 or the new digital standard, then you have true ownership of your asset. And if you are an FTX and you truly own your Bitcoin, you had a UCC filing, you wouldn't have been stuck in the bankruptcy court and lost all the money that you would have lost in the bankruptcy court. So everything we're trying to do is in a run-up to a digitally native world, and using your life insurance policy or your HELOC as collateral to go buy Bitcoin is the holy grail. Nobody does that right now. Not Robinhood. Robinhood, you can use your Apple stock as collateral and go buy Bitcoin, but you can't do the inverse. Right? So whoever cracks that nut and then allows the true democratization of real-world assets, the true democratization of alternative assets, where you can be your own prime broker, you can be your own money manager and have access to the same type of investments that the big Wall Street players have, then you're really starting to disrupt Wall Street. And my old firm, Bank of New York Mellon, has $8 billion a year in security servicing revenue. A lot of that goes away over the next, I wish it was shorter, but it's going to be 20 years, 10 or 20 years. There's a lot of vested interests that don't want to see that go away. You don't need 5 players between me and a credit card transaction. I don't need 7 players between me and a purchase of Amazon stock. All that will go away over time, replacing trust with truth, being able to bilaterally transact with a truthful party.
So we obviously talked about the HELOCs that kind of started this whole thing for Provenance and Figure. Now we're talking about life insurance and Infinio, and I keep pointing this way because Jackson Infinio is right in my line of sight, so that's why I'm pointing at him there. What is next? Because the HELOCs, life insurance is going to get somewhat disrupted. So what is next in terms of digitally native on-chain assets that you guys are seeing and wanting to go to?
Private credit continues to be the place where we're focused. The more complex the asset, the more friction, the more disintermediation is applicable. And in private credit, you can spin up digitally native loans in a way that you can't with other assets. So people are trying to do equity. I would love to have the entire equity market on blockchain. It's the holy grail, right? After the Starbucks coffee, it's the asset holy grail, I would say. But disintermediating Charles Schwab and Goldman Sachs' prime broker, and especially the DTC, which is the Central Securities Registrar, is a very, very long process. We should be able to do it because it's cheaper, faster, and safer, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. So when we do that, we will have hit the big time. So it's going to be private credit. It's going to be bonds. It's going to be more complex assets that don't have a robust marketplace right now. And then I think with YLDS, we start to disrupt the payment rails, cross-border remit in particular. So private credit and cash are the 2 things I'm most excited about right now.
Okay, and I think you mentioned auto loans as well. So
solar, auto, any of the chattel loans are ripe for blockchain. RV loans, right? Travis, we spoke about, which are a really good use case. Anything in the home space, the home equity investments, first lien mortgages. Again, complex assets that don't have bonds, complex assets that don't have a proper marketplace today, that don't have a whole ton of vested interest trying to keep them out. There's 15 players in a mortgage and a home equity line of credit that are involved, which is just an insane amount of rent seekers, rent takers. If you can replace trust with truth, so the beauty of the HELOC, let me give you 30 seconds to run out of time. If you've taken out a HELOC, you've taken out a life insurance policy, you sit at your kitchen table and you sign your life away with real documents. All those documents are created, they're digitized, they're put into an encrypted object store, and each document has a hash written to the NFT that creates the loan. So you do the origination, you do the warehouse, you do the securitization, and 5 years later someone wants to buy that NFT, you have access to all those individual underlying documents that support the NFT, which makes it really a game changer. Because right now in the TradFi world, You got to hire a lawyer. The lawyer's got to go searching through the filing cabinet if he wants to do an audit of the video notary session. Maybe there's a CD that sits in some lawyer's filing cabinet that you got to find 5 years from now. And then think about longer term assets, bonds with a 30-year lifestyle, mortgages with a 30-year lifetime. We're working with a commercial real estate firm that has a 100-year lifetime. These things are need to be a lot more controlled in a decentralized manner that has a simple interface where you can go and understand the asset in a much easier construct.
All right, Anthony, like I said, thank you so much for being here.
We can do this all day.
We could actually do this all day, and I'm glad I got to come full circle with one of the first blockchains that I had heard about, 5-6 years ago, and now I get to talk to you about it. So thank you so much for being here, and thanks to the RWA staff for having us.
Thanks, guys.